Good morning, everybody. At least good morning, Sydney time, Australia. I realise we have some global friends on this webinar, and of course, many here in Australia. My name's Peter Berry. I'm the Managing Director of Peter Berry Consultancy. It's my pleasure to take you through this masterclass on our very exciting and brand new 2020 benchmarks to do with the Hogan 360. What I'm going to do is talk more broadly initially about some trends with the Hogan 360 and what's happening with the 360 movement around the world, then introduce you to our brilliant research that's come from the updated manual, and then I want to show you some other research where we're comparing 360s with the personality profiles and share some of the insights. One of the key things you'll get today is what are the different competencies at different levels of the organisation. For example, a board member and CEO has very different competencies from someone who's a frontline manager. And we're going to take you into those insights, and maybe research can then inform leadership development programs, coaching, talent identification, all of that. Just before we get into the content, I would ask everyone to send our PBC moderator your email details, so we know you're on this conference call, and then she will be able to send you, post the workshop, the materials we're using today, and potentially the actual manual itself. So please make sure that we have your email contacts. Thank you. Okay, so PBC has been a global distributor of Hogan personality products for 20 years. We love working with the Hogans, and Robert and Joyce Hogan did an amazing job 30 years ago when they opened their business and introduced the science of personality. About 20 years ago, we started working on the design of the 360, a multi-rater assessment, where typically you are assessed by boss, peers and direct reports. 10 years ago, we were really privileged to be asked by Hogans in America to put the Hogan on the name of the 360. So hence today it's the Hogan 360, 17 languages, and even used by big multinationals in the world like Shell, and big brand names in the States like Walmart and GE. So we always say that if you give me a person's personality profile together with the 360, there's no place to hide. We've got all the data we need to have. Core personality sitting below the waterline, reputation and behaviour as seen by your friends and colleagues at work to give us your visible reputation. So before we take a deep dive into some of the data from the benchmark manual update, a few comments from me about what's happening generally around the world in the space of assessments. Firstly, on the left-hand side of the slide, we highlight the importance of using Hogan personalities to capture the bright side, the inside and the dark side, so that we've got an holistic scientific set of data to explain the core personality. Behaviour that is likely to help you or hinder you in the pursuit of your goals in life, which can be indicated from the MVPI. Then on the right hand side is the 4-quadrant leadership model that sits inside our 360 assessment. We measure self-management and relationship management. You might call that behavioural competencies or EQ competencies. And down the bottom we measure business competencies, both working in the business and working on, and that might be your hard skills. Soft skills at the top, hard skills at the bottom, EQ at the top, IQ at the bottom. And if you put both together, the personality and the 360, like I said, you've got the most powerful and cost-effective way of measuring one's leadership effectiveness. Are they operating at their full potential or not? On the right-hand side of the page, I've just indicated that in the last 15 years, there's been a journey where originally 360 was confidential, just for individual feedback. No one got to see it. Whereas today it's used right across the life cycle of human resource management. It can be talent identification, succession planning, career development. Even some companies are using it as part of the remuneration discussion. So it's definitely moved a long way from simply a confidential feedback process. Also, there's a lot of good products in the marketplace around the science behind 360 assessments, but I've also got to warn you that there's probably some very cheap and not so scientific assessments in the marketplace. So what do we say? We say any decent 360 that's worth its weight in gold has to be supported by a technical manual. That manual's got to outline the reliability and validity of the tool. Without that, it's a house of cards. It has no legs to stand on. And part of our reliability and validity is sharing with you what our benchmarks have recently found. The second part of this slide talks about the fact that you must have benchmarks. And we have benchmarks here for something like 17,500 managers that are now in our 360 pool. Those benchmarks are between industries, by gender, by sector, and by job role, frontline manager up to a CEO board member, and we can give you quartiles too. So for example, one of the exciting things we're doing is making greater use of a benchmark at the 75th percentile if an organisation is interested in measuring itself against high performers. Care has to be taken with customised assessments because you've got to have the validity and the use of external benchmarks to be able to understand the results. So that's where the Hogan 360 is incredibly strong. We have very robust benchmarks, but I've got to admit that there is a trend towards being interested in customised assessments. Increasingly, organisations say we've got our own leadership framework, it's based on our own values or goals, and that's fair enough, but that leadership framework ought to have some science behind it and not just be made up by the latest HR manager. Secondly, it's got to be validated back to the fact that that framework will have validity and can be used with a good 360. On the right-hand side of this slide, increasingly organisations are saying they would like to get a return on investment when they invest in assessments, and the most easy way to do that is by looking at people and business analytics and the causal link between the two in driving and predicting business outcomes. So one of my clients is Shell. They're very, very strong on mapping the impact of a leader on the team on the engagement of the workforce, and that engagement driving business outcomes such as safety, profitability, customer service, productivity. But easier said than done. I think the last piece of research I saw is only about 20% of companies are doing the people and business analytics successfully. So let's get cracking, fasten our seatbelts and get excited. Our new manual supplement, the 2020 benchmark, now has 17,680 managers from all around the world. We have a large Australian population, very significant American population. We have Mexicans, the Japanese, the Canadians. So that's increasingly powerful for when you want a local population benchmark. And we have them by all job roles. You'll see in a moment we have board members down to frontline supervisors. These 17,500 managers that we have in our database have been assessed by nearly 200,000 other raters. There's a self-rating, which we keep separate from your score, but these other raters typically come from managers, peers and reports. So massive data, and we're also doing some exciting research by looking at the correlations with Hogan personalities where we have them as well. More about that later on. So we have it by industry, and I've just listed here our top 10 industries that make up our database. IT and telecommunications is incredibly strong. We have a massive amount of data for that industry. Pretty much the same with insurance and superannuation. Government, very strong on government. We do a lot of work in government areas. Manufacturing is quite significant. Banking and financial, building and construction, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and so on. So if at any stage a client wants to come to us and say, we're unique, we're in this particular industry, can you give us an industry benchmark? We'll be able to tell them what that benchmark is and how robust it might be in terms of the population that lives inside. So we're very proud of the different industries where we would say we're the subject matter experts. By sector, private sector is incredibly strong. It's about 84% of our database. The public sector, government administration, makes up 13%. And we also have 3% made up of not-for-profit. But even though it's 3%, because it's dwarfed by the private sector, we're still able to say, hey, we've got 516 managers in non-for-profit, and statistically, that's still a strong benchmark for that particular industry. So by sector is very good information. And it's interesting when we do some white papers looking at the difference between those three sectors, just understands why are people attracted to those sectors and what do you see by way of the culture from that 360 data. Job levels, I find this to be a fascinating area, and I'm getting very excited about the different research we can do here. 1% of our data comes from board members. We think it's fantastic that we've got 164 board members in our database. CEO, board members and managing directors, 705 is a fantastic database to have as a benchmark for what the CEOs look like. Then you've got self-employed CEOs, they could be entrepreneurs. So we've got a few of those in there. Divisional leader, general manager, and the biggest by far is our frontline manager. Not a surprise, if you think of the hierarchy in a business, you're going to have most managers sitting at the coalface. Frontline supervision, the frontline leader. So very good data by different job levels, and I'll be analysing some of this to look at the different competencies at the various levels shortly. Gender, males 65%, females 35%. So if anyone says, right, can you show us the differences here? Again, my research team can pull it out, and there certainly are some differences here, which we've written up previously in white papers. Okay, so that's a little sample of the breakdown of the data we have for those nearly 18,000 managers in the database. One of the very powerful and unique features of the Hogan 360 is the strengths and opportunities tables. So the first part of the 360 is 50 items that are ranked from 1 to 7, and you get a benchmark against the global average, and that generates your overall 360 score. Something very special to the Hogan 360 is the strengths and opportunities tables. There's 26 items in each, so someone can look at 26 strengths to pick from when they're trying to identify what they think the top 4 are. Same with opportunities. And where did these tables come from? They came from our research by my brilliant consulting psychologist team, 30,000 open tech responses over about 10 years where people gave us verbatim comments about strengths and opportunities, which we then pulled together in the table. The weightings, if someone says this is your top strength or opportunity, we allocate 4 votes, second choice gets 3, third choice 2, fourth choice 1, so it can be listed very clearly what your strengths and opportunities are. So the rankings, remember I said that there's 26 strengths and opportunities. We pulled out the top 10 strengths by job level. So remember, this is the strengths table. I'll show you the opportunities table in a moment. So the strengths, first of all, the benchmarks, CEO, executive board member, divisional leader, someone quite senior, general manager, maybe in the middle of a multinational or pretty senior in a smaller business, manager, supervisor, frontline, and we've actually got some employees who had no direct reports. You might be a technical specialist, you're still a manager but not having any team. So that's the different categories by job level. What we've done is analysed here how the top strengths were ranked from 1 to 26, and as I said, I'm highlighting the top 10. So working hard is the #1 strength for the first group. It's second for divisional leader, general manager, and manager, supervisor, and employee. So pretty much everyone has working hard at first or second. But look at the big difference for the CEO executive board in second place. They are visionary and strategic, and it makes sense, doesn't it? That's probably their role, sitting on a board or being the CEO. But it's not a strength for most of the others, where it came in 12th, 13th, 25th, and 24th. So you can see in your early days, what got you to here is not going to get you to there in the strength that being visionary and strategic tends to emerge later in life as you're going up the corporate tree. But there's a fantastic learning opportunity here to start building that capability in younger people earlier in their careers. #3 is really interesting. The most senior people are seen as having strong leadership skills, and the others were sitting in 10th, 9th, 14th and 22nd. So the higher up the tree you get, it tends to be you're showing leadership competencies, which makes sense because you're leading the whole of the business or a team or a business unit. The fourth one's good. People have got solid technical ability, experience and knowledge. They're competent to do the job, which is good news to know. But for the top category, that's normally fourth, and you can see it's first and first for the others. So on your way up the ladder, it's about being competent and being hardworking. And then as you get to be more in that C-suite, we want to see more of the broader strategic capabilities. Then we've got competitive and determined. It just happens to be that CEOs and executives are stronger in that area. So they're going to be tenacious about their KPIs. They're going to be very motivated about the purpose of the organisation and making a difference. Action oriented, more of a strength in the middle and the lower parts of the organisation. Customer focused. It happens to be that the executives and CEOs are a little bit more customer centric, perhaps looking more broadly at the market, working on the business, not so much in the business, and then the rest speak for themselves. Now, the opportunities to improve, fascinating data, because the top three is pretty much the same consistently right through the job level, from down the bottom to up the top. So stop taking on too much and spreading yourself thin was first, second. So we're all guilty of overcommitting. And that goes back to the previous slide where the number one strength is hardworking. So I hope you can see the correlation. I'm damn hardworking, but equally that strength becomes a weakness. I'm overcommitted, I'm spreading myself too thin, I'm not being strategic. Number two is fascinating. Would you please challenge the poor performers? It was in second, third, fourth. So sorry, the bad news is the poor performers are alive and well. So the question is, who are your bottom 10%? If you were rehiring tomorrow, who are the ones you would not rehire? Challenging poor performance, it is in your business plan. Does the executive look at it every 90 days with a view to improving or removing people over that next 3 months? Number three, delegate more. It could be a product of personality, i.e. I'm a highly diligent person, I'm a micromanager control freak, I don't really like letting go, or it could just be I'm very hands-on, you know, working in the business and overcommitting. So I like to think that the first one here, stop taking on too much, together with the third one, delegate more, I tend to call this, let's aim for more effective workload management. So that you've all got your workload, but what's the right balance between working in the business and on the business? Where do I add the most value given my capability and experience? Am I delegating to other people to build mini-me's and build a high-performing team? So fascinating that it was the same for all three. And those two opportunities, better workload management and challenging poor performance, they should be in any leadership competency framework. It should be coached. We should be teaching competencies around how to improve in these areas. So it was those three giving you consistency that makes it quite generic. Then one of the things that is very powerful about our benchmark is we have cutoffs that get you into the 75th percentile and higher. So this is, you're taking the top 25% of people in our database and looking at what their strengths are. So very powerful for perhaps thinking about how we fast track the development of our high potentials. If we're a high performing enterprise, how about we take the managers to the next level? And this is very powerful. We've even got some companies that are saying, let's benchmark our own 360 results against the PBC Hogan 75th percentile because we want to stretch our leaders. We want them aiming to be the best. We don't want to aim for perhaps mediocrity, which they might say is 50 percentile, even though we know there's a lot of damn good people sitting in there because of that bell curve. So let's have a little bit of a closer look here. The C-suite, which I might call the CEO executive board, the top of the tree, their number one strength is strong leadership skills. That happened to be the same with general managers. Number two, this is a massive difference. The top of the tree is very visionary and strategic. It came in second as their biggest strength. For other categories, it was 10th, 12th, 22nd. So as I've already said, as you progress up that pyramid, you have to be visionary and strategic. It's not so much working in the business, it's more working on. It's not so much hands-on operational, it's that helicopter view. Number three, most people are hardworking. Number 4, most people are action oriented. Number 5, there's a bit of a difference at the top of the tree. They're very customer focused. And I think that gets them thinking beyond the business. It's probably getting them into the marketplace. What's happening with customers, and do we measure customer satisfaction? Are we trying to be close to our customers? Then motivates and inspires others. I love this particular piece of data because I think it leads to employee engagement. And as we know, employee engagement pays. It ought to be part of the business plan and the KPIs. So motivates and inspires others. It's the 6th biggest strength for the C-suite. And compared to others, 19th, 17th, 20, 21. So at the front line, we're just not getting leaders that do the motivational and inspirational. Hence, that's where a lot of businesses are struggling with employee engagement and maybe even customer engagement too. Then we go down to ethics. Everyone's pretty ethical. That's nice to know. And then another difference comes with setting clear goals and driving results. The top of the tree does that one a bit more effectively, and being competitive and determined. So I think what you see emerging here is the C-suite, very visionary, very motivational, very driven around performance. That's what got them to the top of the tree, or that's what they learnt on their journey. So if you think for a moment about middle managers, they need to be competent and hardworking and delivering service and operational excellence, and they've still got to do that while they learn competencies in this first column. So now let's look at the opportunities to improve. So everybody is guilty of taking on too much, even at this 75th percentile. Challenging poor performance, sitting in 2nd or 3rd, delegating more. So we have the same 3 again. It's universal. It's right across the board. So remember my take on this one. It's characterised by better workload management, challenging poor performance, those 10%. And I even noticed Aon Hewitt, one of the global engagement survey providers, their data shows 2/3 of employees are engaged, 1/3 are disengaged, and half of those 1/3, about 16%, can be toxic. Aon Hewitt say it's destroying business value. So these are the people that drink vinegar for breakfast and suck lemons for morning tea, very unpopular with their co-workers, but it's the job of the leader to take appropriate action. Okay, so again, quite generic competencies there around opportunities to improve. So let's just summarise the issues so far. The 2 biggest opportunities are stop taking on too much and spreading yourself thin, plus the delegate more. That's where I've said I call that better workload management in and on the business. Be quite strategic. Where do I add the most value? Am I building a high-performing team? And with the delegation goes the accountability and the responsibility. Then the other big issue is challenging poor performance. I've touched on that a couple of times. Most managers don't like having the difficult conversations. We put it off for far too long. We hope that by some miracle it'll just fix itself instead of having to have that tough conversation. But it's a big issue because those people are typically disengaged and white-anting the business. So better workload management. Sorry about all the text here, but for those who want a bit of a data, the first dot point is most managers are guilty of being too much in the business and not enough on the business. On the business is adding broader value, innovation, strategy, engagement, whereas working in is being hands-on. So the team ought to be a brand for the leader. So see yourself as building a high-performing team, and that team should be responsible for employee engagement, customer satisfaction, service operational excellence, and business results. Can I just give you a couple of quotes that Bob Hogan and I always share? Leadership is about results. Teams deliver results. Judge the leader by their team. Another quote from Bob Hogan, leadership is a resource for the team. The team is more important than that manager, and we should judge the leader by the business outcomes from that team, not their own individual performance. The second dot point, a lot of leaders don't have a strategic planning cycle. When I work with my clients, we try to set up a planning cycle. When during the year do we have the 2-day offsite to review the previous year and project 3 to 5 years on with the 1-year plan? get the second tier plans to support that master plan, then introduce your quarterly reviews. And those quarterly reviews do two things. They review the strategy and the KPI outcomes, and they do some team building to make sure they're a high performing team. And the third one, we've got to learn to delegate. And again, that's a function of personality and behaviour. Some people with their Hogan personalities, i.e. high diligent, really struggle to let go. Equally for others, it's a question of empowering others and building that high performing team so that you've got people who are capable of accepting that delegation. And we've got to deal with the poor performers too. Challenging poor performers, oh God, I've taught this so often in leadership programs and had to coach so many managers because it often comes up as the second opportunity to improve. Poor performers, very unpopular with the co-workers. They want some action taken against them because they're not doing their share of the workload. They're finger pointing. They might be bullying their co-workers. You see typically some pretty toxic behaviour for perhaps that bottom 10%, or Aon Hewitt say bottom 16%. So what I say is identifying your top 10% and improving them or removing them in the next 90 days should be part of the executive agenda on a rolling basis. It's just something that needs to have a higher profile for our executives. So I've been teaching a 6-stage conversation process about how to have the conversation because most managers haven't been trained or don't feel confident. Number one, be clear about the issue. What's annoying you about this poor performer? Is it their performance or their behaviour? Be very clear in your mind so you can start the conversation with the specifics. Number two, state your expectations. How are they not being met? Is the person not delivering on the KPIs? Is the person not living the values? You've got to state what the unacceptable is and try to pin it down to their contract of employment, their job description, the values of the organisation. Three, be clear about the impact that this poor performance is having. Is it having a negative effect on the team? Is it having a negative impact on their own performance against their KPIs? So you've got to be clear about the consequences of their performance or behaviour. Number four is where you draw breath and you say, right, stop. I've had my say, give me your perspective. How do you see this problem that I've put on the table today? And what you're doing what you're doing here is testing for, do they acknowledge the problem and they might be inclined to address it or fix it, or is there denial? They don't even want to admit that there's an issue here. So keep asking lots of open questions till you get to the bottom of it. Number five, explain the consequences, i.e. the next step if we can't fix this performance or behavioural problem, i.e. it could lead to a first warning. You might have to formally get HR involved. They might be put on a performance management scheme. Number six, summarise the meeting by getting an agreement. Now, what are the details of the way forward? What are we committing to improve this? How often should it be reviewed? How will we make sure that it's going to become second nature going forward so we don't have to have this conversation before? So if you like that 6 step, by all means, still shamelessly think about how you could introduce it into your organisation or even use it yourself. So by looking at all of the brilliant data in the benchmarking manual, and I've got a copy of my manual here, it's a 50-page document put together by my smartest psychologists. They've done a great job here. By looking at the different competencies at job level and 75th percentile level, we've identified what we think are about 16 competencies that the most successful and high-performing leaders demonstrate in the business, which probably need to form the basis of leadership development and other areas in the business, like people management, high potential talent, and so on. So it's the ability to be visionary and strategic, demonstrate strong leadership skills, motivating and inspiring others to create the engagement, thinking long-term about new opportunities. So being quite strategic with your time frame and innovative with those new opportunities, competitive and determined around achieving the purpose and the goals of the organisation, setting unequivocal goals and driving the results, being assertive and energetic in a constructive way to drive those outcomes, showing passion. I love the word passion, and the highly successful leaders do show it. Then the second 8 Setting high performance expectations. I think you can see a theme here about what brilliant leaders do well. Communicating that long-term vision, not just having that vision. Setting long-term stretch goals, not just the short-term. Being very customer-centric, thinking about the marketplace, not getting beyond service and product. Working hard to improve morale, tied to the engagement. Bringing a positive attitude to work. That's being responsible for the attitude you bring to work. Electing to have your positive mojo, no matter what's going on in your private life, for example. Suggesting new and original ideas, so there's a bit of innovation, being agile, being the industry leader, being the thought leader, and strong influencing skills. So they're the sort of 8 big competencies that are standing out in our research, which comes out of doing what I've done, which is taking a deeper dive into all of that data. This data is wonderful data to do a range of things. One, it can be a baseline for creating a leadership competency model. So leadership competency models are growing, they're very popular. Lots of organisations are sort of doing their in-house customization, but be careful that you're not building a house of cards or that there's no science or rigour. So based on the data I just shared with you, that would be a wonderful thing to share with our clients and say, come on, we'll be a partner to you in developing a leadership framework that has science and rigour. Secondly, it can inform the training needs analysis. So you might have your own data on what you think the training needs are, and then we combine it with the Hogan PBC data, which we've just gone through, and hopefully there's a marriage made in heaven about then doing something quite strategic. 3, it should shape the content for leadership development programs. So I think a great leadership development program is where there's self-awareness, personality and 360 team assessment. Then we try to build the business competencies, and it could be along the lines of the material we've already shared today. Assist with talent identification and development. That's big for a lot of clients, and it should influence the coaching practices. So hopefully the coaching is assessment based and using some of this data. So the data is wonderful. It can be used in so many ways to build more rigour. So what I've done is then introduce what I call 3 meta competencies by looking at the 16. I think the 3 meta competencies are having leadership capability, strategic capability, and being engaging. So let me just show you now. There's 6 things that I think constitute the competency around leadership. I'll let you have a quick read. I've already spoken to each of those, and I would say confidently, with my hand on my heart, they would be the 3 critical competencies if you were teaching leadership effectiveness based on this data. What do great leaders do as they rise up the ladder? Secondly, we know that leaders have to be strategic. This is established by the data. They have to be operational too, but the better you are in our 360 data, the more you're going to be that big picture leader, very big picture, and clearly very strong on the vision. And you can see 5 sort of sub themes living under that meta competency there. And the third one is engagement, which I'm thrilled with because I'm a great believer in leadership drives engagement, and engagement drives performance, and ultimately engagement pays. So it's a no-brainer. You should be doing it. So what does an engaging leader do? They show passion, they motivate people, they focus on morale, they bring a positive attitude, and they're very customer centric and bring the voice of the customer to the team. So I love that little model: leadership, strategy, engagement. So there it is. That's a business excellence model. If you were going to say, let's do some leadership spend in the next year, building some capability, you would really focus on those 3, plus the earlier workload management, plus the earlier challenging poor performers. Those 5 together would be a fantastic intervention. So we at PBC have what we call a LEAP model. LEAP is an acronym: leadership, engagement, and performance. So typically we say, let's look at the CEO and the executive team at the top of the 3, and we've believed for a number of years that that team ought to be driving 3 things. One is leadership on the left. So we want to measure and improve leadership effectiveness. You do it through the Hogan personality, the Hogan 360, and our own PBC high performing team assessment. So we do believe that leadership is the engine room for driving strategy and engagement of your people to deliver bottom line outcomes. How many bad leaders do we see? How many dysfunctional teams do we see? What drives disengagement? It's normally a bad leader, a toxic team. Then in the middle we have the strategy. Great leaders should be quite strategic with their operating rhythm. So getting together annually, doing the 1 year and the longer term plans, doing the second tier plans, using a balanced scorecard, financial, non-financial, which is at the bottom of the screen. Then a plan on a page. Keep your business plan simple. Have it on a single page so it's succinct, alive, motivational. Get your purpose really clear. And the easiest way to do a plan on a page is to ask the executive team putting it together, what does winning look like for the next year? Just get them focused on what does winning look like, and they can sort of be quite strategic then. And making sure you're very disciplined with your planning cycle, and very importantly, those quarterly reviews. People, hire the best people. That's where you use Hogan for selection. Very good onboarding and motivation. Give people their development and career opportunities, otherwise they could become disengaged, and then you'll start to get that discretionary effort. They'll be stronger on the customer service, stronger on the safety, giving you the productivity and efficiency. So the aim under people is to have a high level of engagement, and that can be done from using Culture Amp, Glint, Aon, Hewitt, Gallup. There's some fantastic survey providers out there. If you get the leadership component right, driving the strategy and the people, you're going to get the performance outcomes, which is why an organisation exists. It exists to deliver on its purpose, make a difference, leave a legacy, outperform others. So we want to see these 4 metrics coming out of it: the employee engagement, the customer satisfaction, the service operational excellence, and the financial results. So we think that that LEAP model sits very neatly with what's come out of the benchmarking research on the previous slide, that leadership is a set of capabilities that can be learned, strategy is the same, and engagement pays, so it ought to be one of your KPIs. The second bit of research that I want to spend a few minutes on is just looking at different research where we're currently working with the Hogan team and Dr. Ryan Sherman, the chief scientist in Tulsa. We matched 2,500 360s with Hogan personality assessments, and we're looking at the correlations that exist here. We then go down into the HPI. The HPI, the ambition scale, has the strongest correlations with the competencies that were coming out of the CEO board category and the 75th percentile. In the HDS, bold, mischievous, colourful and imaginative have very positive correlations. In the MVPI, fascinating data, it's power, altruistic and affiliation that are showing significant correlations. So now we look at using both tools together to measure and improve leadership effectiveness, and we can see these wonderful correlations. In the HPI, adjustment correlates beautifully with the Hogan 360, very strong in self-management and relationship management, and predicting a good 360 outcome there in green. Ambition was not so much impacting on self-management and relationship management, but when it comes to the business performance, quite strong, both working in and working on. Sociability, too noisy and loud to be self-regulating, for the rest neutral. Interpersonal sensitivity, beautiful. Strong people skills coming through. And then prudence, very predictive of the first 3, not so much working on the business because it's more about working in the business, that professionalism, but still a good 360 outcome. Inquisitive, negative for the first 2, too many shiny bright objects going on and impacting your time management and your focus. Learning approach, quite good on the business side of things. So what we can tell from this research is a good 360 Hogan comes from perhaps being blessed with positive results in the Hogan personality assessments for adjustment, ambition, interpersonal sensitivity and prudence. In the HDS, the dark side, when strengths can become weaknesses if you're not self-aware or not self-regulating or you drop your mask, the first 4 are particularly challenging in terms of making it difficult for managers to always get good 360 outcomes. Now, I should say I've coached a lot of C-suite executives who, despite having the moving away or loner profile with high scores in the first 5 Hogan scales, can still get very good 360s. But it's like starting a sprint 10 metres behind the line, because the first 5 can really hold you back. So excitable can be the most challenging one of all the 11 HDS scales that will prevent you from getting a good 360. Skeptical, you're a little bit tough and harsh. Cautious, it's to do with not being an effective leader, not making decisions, motivated not to fail. Reserved, you really don't like people sometimes, so it makes it difficult to do the engagement piece. And then you can see some green coming through for working on the business. Mischievous, colourful, imaginative, those correlations there with positive outcomes, but not with the self-management. Quite understandable at face value. The mischievous person is naughty, the colourful could be attention seeking, the imaginative is, you know, off with the pixies a little bit with a million ideas, so the self-regulation is not there. So a couple of the individual correlations, I mentioned that ambition was very strong. With the 360 items, it correlated very highly with very competitive and driven. These are very strong statistical correlations here. Having the passion to make a difference, being assertive and energetic, thinking longer term. Now you can see the connection back to the benchmarking data that I was talking about earlier. Then bold, a correlation with competitive and driven. Not so much the other 3, but it still gets a run because of that first one. And now you'll see some stronger correlations. Mischievous, competitive and driven, assertive, driving new ideas. Then you've got colourful. The colourful person, I think, has the strongest correlations in the HDS with a good 360. Very competitive, very assertive, very passionate, very strong influencing skills. Imaginative, well, what a fantastic correlation with what it's meant to predict new and original ideas. And the third one, thinking long-term about new opportunities, plus the competitive drive and the passion. So a lot of good stuff there, provided we can separate the good idea from the bad idea. Power in the MVPI, not a surprise, very competitive and driven, passionate, long-term, big picture. Very competitive and driven, power, passionate. I think this one should be headed altruistic. It's got it at the top of the page, but not in the slide. The altruistic person is passionate and they take customer very seriously, which is fantastic. Thinking about how we can leave a legacy, the purpose of the organisation. And then you've got affiliation. They're very competitive and driven. They're also assertive. They've got passion and they've got good people skills, which you would expect in affiliation. So my final slide is there's fantastic research that we are collecting. The purpose of this webinar was to share with you the very exciting data from our benchmarking, which gives the Hogan 360 its validity and its reliability. And it shows us different competencies at different levels of the organisational structure to inform leadership investments. I've also touched on the other exciting piece of research, looking at roughly 2,500 matched sets, where we have both the Hogan personality and the Hogan 360, and we look at correlations there to predict high performance. So I've always had this quote: give me a manager's Hogan personality assessments and their Hogan 360 results, and they've got no place to hide. So that's all we need to do to start the coaching intervention, a leadership program, 2 sets of data. The Hogan personality tells you what's happening below the waterline. The Hogan 360, what's happening above the waterline, or your love note from work. And put the 2 together, and then we're able to pinpoint core natural personality together with perhaps chosen behaviour, learned behaviour, or sometimes good habits, but occasionally bad habits. And then you've got the whole of it, the why and the what. And you can enrich the coaching and learning experiences and really be impactful with the outcomes that we're trying to get with these leadership interventions. We are very happy to make that benchmarking document available to any of you. So please send the moderator your email contact if you haven't already done so we can share this PowerPoint and that manual with you. So at this stage, are there any questions?
It doesn't look like there are any questions at this stage currently. Just to let everyone know, we will be sending a copy of these slides out to everyone who has sent through their names and email addresses to us, as well as a recording of today's webinar.
Very good. Well, if there's no questions, Jar Jar, I might just do a quick wrap up and thank everybody for their attendance. We have people from America, Mexico, as well as Australia, so it's great to be able to work with our partners. Can I just say that PBC and Hogan have the highest standards around science. Everything we do is based on the rigour of our data. We love doing the research, writing up the white papers, running webinars like this, and should you wish to learn more about either the Hogan Personality Assessments or the Hogan 360, please get in touch with us. But I hope there's some good takeaway value from here today. Thank you very much.